The nightmare always started the same way. Dense jungle canopy, triple-layer vegetation so thick that noon looked like dusk. The air was soup hot, wet, impossible to breathe without feeling like you were drowning. 6 voices on the radio. Her team. Delta Force operators who'd survived things that would break normal men. But someone had talked. Someone up the chain had sold them out. And now those 6 voices were screaming. Contact rear, taking fire from static. Medic. Christ, I need a medic. More static. Hawkeye, fall back. Get to the extraction point. We'll cover. The transmission cut to nothing. Just the empty hiss of a radio carrying ghosts. Kira Dalton woke gasping. Her hand was already reaching for the rifle that wasn't there. 2,300 hours. The ceiling of her temporary quarters at Cypress Ridge Reconnaissance Base stared back at her in the darkness. Louisiana, not the jungle. Not that place that officially didn't exist where 6 good men had died because someone in Washington decided intelligence was worth trading for favors. She sat up slowly, let her breathing settle. 47 confirmed kills across 3 years of classified operations. She'd put down insurgent commanders, bomb makers, and men who trafficked in human misery. She'd done her job with cold precision, and every single one of those kills had been righteous. But the math didn't work anymore. 47 kills minus 6 teammates equaled a debt she could never repay. September dawn came to the bayou with all the subtlety of a hammer. One moment it was dark. The next gray light filtered through the cypress trees and Spanish moss that surrounded the base like nature's own razor wire. The humidity was already pushing 90%. The temperature would hit 95 degrees by noon. Kira stood in front of the mirror and studied the woman staring back, 24 years old, 5'5" on a good day. Brown hair pulled back in the tight military bun that revealed sharp angular features. Gray-green eyes that had seen things no one her age should see. 128 pounds soaking wet. Not exactly the physical profile most people pictured when they thought elite operator. That was fine. She'd stopped caring what people pictured a long time ago. She dressed in standard ACU fatigues, laced her boots with the precision of someone who had done it 10,000 times, shouldered the tactical backpack that contained everything she owned that mattered, and picked up the rifle case. The Shaytac M200 intervention inside weighed 35 pounds unloaded. Custom modifications pushed it to 42 with the Night Force attacker scope and titanium suppressor. Most men struggled to carry it for extended periods. She'd humped it through mountains and deserts and jungles where the vegetation was so thick you needed a machete just to move 10 feet. The rifle had never failed her. Not once. That was more than she could say about most of the people in her life. Outside Cypress Ridge was starting to wake up. Soldiers moved between buildings with the purposeful efficiency of people who'd been doing the same routines for years. PT had finished an hour ago. Now came breakfast, equipment checks, and the daily grind of military life at a training facility where the stakes were measured in performance reviews rather than body counts. That's why she'd requested assignment here. She needed a place where perfect shots didn't mean the difference between mission success and 6 flag-draped coffins. She needed quiet. The dusty Humvee that had brought her from the airfield sat idling in front of Charlie Company's operations center. Kira stepped out into the thick morning air and immediately felt eyes tracking her movement. Soldiers paused mid-conversation. A few pointed, others just stared. Word had gotten around. The new precision marksman, the specialist with the classified service record, the woman with the Predator's call sign stenciled on her tactical vest in bold black letters against olive drab fabric. Hawkeye. You're Dalton. The voice belonged to a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite and weathered by sandstorms. Late 50s, maybe 58. 6'2", broad shoulders, arms that could still probably bench press twice his body weight, despite the gray threading through his high and tight haircut. His name tape read Brennan. The chevrons on his collar marked him as a master sergeant, the highest enlisted rank before you crossed into the rarefied air of sergeant major. Yes, Master Sergeant. Kira's voice came out steady. Not loud, not aggressive, just present, like bedrock beneath floodwater. Raymond Brennan looked her up and down with the kind of assessment that came from 3 decades of evaluating soldiers. His eyes lingered on the rifle case. then on her slight build, then back to her face. Mighty small for hauling that rig around. It wasn't quite mockery, more like disappointment, like he'd been hoping for something different and reality had failed to deliver. I manage Master Sergeant. You manage. Brennan repeated the words, slowly testing them. Specialist, that case probably weighs half what you do. And according to your orders, you're supposed to be our designated marksman for Operation Bayou Phantom. You do understand this is swamp terrain, right? Triple canopy vegetation. Visibility cut to nothing. Not exactly sniper-friendly conditions. I'm aware of the environmental challenges, Master Sergeant. Are you? It wasn't a question. Brennan shifted his weight, crossed his arms. The body language was clear. This conversation was a formality, and he'd already reached his conclusion. Well, Specialist Dalton, grab your gear and report to Staff Sergeant Mitchell at Building 6. He's your squad leader. Try to keep up and stay out of the way. He turned to walk away, already dismissing her from his attention, already writing her off as another kid with fancy equipment who'd wash out within a week once reality introduced itself. Kira watched him go. She didn't call after him, didn't defend herself, didn't do anything except shoulder her pack and her rifle case and start walking toward Building 6 with the same calm, purposeful stride she'd used crossing hostile territory in places that didn't appear on any official map. Behind her, she heard Brennan mutter to someone, another tech head with a bird call sign. Give her 48 hours before she's begging for a desk job. The words rolled off her like water off wax canvas. She'd heard worse, much worse, and from people who'd actually earned the right to judge her. Building 6 was a standard military structure, cinder block painted institutional beige, small windows, a door that had been opened by 1,000 hands, leaving smudge marks the cleaners never quite managed to erase. Inside, a dozen soldiers were conducting equipment checks, magazines loaded and counted, radio batteries tested, water supplies verified, medical kits inventoried. A man in his early 30s with Staff Sergeant chevrons looked up as Kira entered. He had an easy competence about him. Not flashy, not aggressive, just quietly capable in the way of people who'd been doing dangerous work long enough to understand that survival came from preparation, not bravado. You must be Dalton. I'm Staff Sergeant Cole Mitchell. Welcome to Bravo Platoon. He extended a hand. His grip was firm but not crushing, testing but not challenging. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. You get settled in your quarters, okay? Yes, Staff Sergeant. Mitchell studied her for a moment. You always this formal, or are you just being polite because it's your first day? Both, Staff Sergeant. That earned a small smile. Fair enough. Let me introduce you around. He raised his voice slightly. Listen up. This is Specialist Kira Dalton, call sign Hawkeye. She's our new designated marksman for Operation Bayou Phantom. Treat her with the same respect you'd treat any team member. The response was a chorus of acknowledgments ranging from genuine welcome to barely concealed skepticism. But one voice cut through the rest with the precision of a scalpel through tissue. Hawkeye, seriously. The speaker was a man in his early 30s with the kind of face that photographed well-square jaw, clear eyes, the kind of features that made mothers trust you and commanding officers promote you. His name tape read Wolf, specialist rank same as Kira. But the way he carried himself suggested someone who'd been the standout performer for so long that it had become part of his identity. Garrett Wolf stood up from the equipment he'd been checking. That's your call sign, Hawkeye? Yes. Kira's response was flat, offering nothing. Cute, very cute. Wolf walked closer, and Kira could see the competitive gleam in his eyes. She'd seen it before. Hell, she'd been dealing with it since basic training. Let me guess, you shot well at whatever cushy posting you came from. Somebody gave you a cool nickname, and now you think you're Special Forces material. I don't think anything, Specialist Wolf. I just do my job. Your job? He made the words sound ridiculous. Right. Well, just so you know, this isn't the kind of job where you can coast on looks in a fancy rifle. Down here in the swamp, you actually have to perform. Mitchell stepped in before Kira could respond. Wolf, that's enough. Get back to your prep. Just saying, Staff Sergeant. Wouldn't want anyone getting the wrong idea about what it takes to operate in this environment. But Wolf returned to his station shooting one last look at Kira that made it clear she was going to have to prove herself every single day. And that was fine. She'd been proving herself her entire military career. One more skeptic wouldn't kill a airman. The mess hall at 1100 hours was controlled chaos. 200 soldiers cycling through lunch with the mechanical efficiency of an assembly line. The smell of industrial food hung in the air, grilled protein overcooked vegetables bread that tasted like cardboard with butter on it. Nutritionally adequate, culinarily soul-crushing. Kira moved through the line with her tray, plain grilled chicken breast, brown rice, steamed broccoli, no sauce, no salt, no dessert, just fuel measured and purposeful. She found an empty table near the far wall, sat down and began eating with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else. Each bite timed, each movement economical, as if she were completely alone in the room. A few tables away, Garrett Wolfe sat with 4 other soldiers. She could feel their attention like heat from a flame, could hear the laughter even if she couldn't make out the specific words. Then Wolfe raised his voice, deliberately, making sure it would carry. "Look at that, the lonely falcon." The words dripped with performance. This wasn't conversation. This was theater. $20 says she can't carry that fancy rifle for more than 15 minutes without crying for help. One of his buddies joined in. Video game call sign. Probably picked it because it sounds badass. Next, she'll be telling us her favorite color is tactical black. Hey, maybe she's real good at Call of Duty. Wolf continued, volume increasing. But this is a different story, princess. This ain't your streaming setup. Kira didn't look up. She continued eating with the same measured precision. Each bite timed, each movement controlled, as if she were completely alone in the room. As if their commentary was just background noise, no more significant than the clatter of trays or the hum of conversation from a dozen other tables. That indifference irritated Wolf more than any comeback could have. You hear what I said?" He stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Several heads turned to watch the confrontation developing. "I'm talking to you, Hawkeye." Finally, she raised her eyes. There was no anger there, no embarrassment, no discomfort. Just an empty, calm assessment that looked right through Wolf like he was made of glass. "I heard. And nothing. You're entitled to your opinion, the specialist." The response completely disarmed him. He'd expected confrontation, defensiveness, maybe tears. Not this passive acceptance that somehow made him feel smaller. Like he'd just picked a fight with someone who'd already forgotten his name. "Well," Wolf muttered, returning to his table under the nervous laughter of his friends. "At least you know your place. Stay in your lane and maybe you'll survive your first week." But Staff Sergeant Mitchell, sitting 2 tables over, noticed something the others missed entirely. The slight curve at the very corner of Kira's mouth. It wasn't a smile. It wasn't amusement. It was patience. The kind of patience a predator had when watching prey that didn't know it was already in the kill zone. At 1400 hours, 15 soldiers stood at attention in the operations center. The building's walls were covered in topographic maps, satellite photos, and tactical diagrams that looked like abstract art to anyone not trained to read them. The air conditioning fought a losing battle against the humidity bleeding in through door seals. Kira stood in the back row, full tactical gear already secured, posture absolutely perfect. She didn't fidget, didn't shift weight, just stood there like a statue carved from stone. Captain Douglas Pierce entered the room and every voice fell silent. He was 38 but looked older, the kind of aging that came from carrying responsibility rather than passing years. His face held the weathered quality of someone who'd spent too many nights making decisions that cost lives no matter which option he chose. "At ease," Pierce's voice carried authority without volume. "Operation Bayou Phantom begins at 0600 tomorrow. Mission parameters are as follows: infiltration into hostile environment, reconnaissance of enemy positions, and neutralization of high-value target using non-lethal simulation rounds." He gestured to an enlarged map showing a tangled network of waterways, swamps and forests that looked like nature's own labyrinth. "You'll insert here south bank of the Cocodrie River. Your objective is located 12 kilometers north at a simulated command complex. The terrain is as hostile as anything you'll encounter in real operations. Shallow swamps, vegetation thick enough to choke on, visibility reduced to near zero in most sectors." A murmur rippled through the assembled soldiers. This wasn't a standard training exercise. This was designed to break people. Pierce continued. Intelligence reports indicate enemy forces have counter-snipers positioned in elevated observation towers. They're equipped with thermal optics and drone reconnaissance. This is a nightmare scenario for precision shooters, which is exactly why each platoon will have designated marksman assets. He consulted his notes. Master Sergeant Brennan, you'll command Alpha Platoon. Specialist Wolf is your primary precision shooter. Wolf nodded, chest expanding slightly with visible confidence. Staff Sergeant Mitchell, you take Bravo Platoon. Pierce paused. You've got the new transfer. Specialist Dalton, call sign Hawkeye. Every eye in the room turned toward Kira. She might as well have been carved from marble for all the reaction she showed. Mitchell frowned, caught off guard. Sir, with all due respect, Specialist Dalton just arrived. Maybe it would be better to integrate her as a standard rifleman until she acclimates to... She's on your team's staff, Sergeant. That's an order, not a suggestion. Pierce's tone left zero room for discussion. Consider this a trial by fire. If she can't handle it, we'll find out soon enough. He paused, looking directly at Kira. If she can, then we'll have learned something interesting. Dismissed. As soldiers filed out, Brennan pulled Mitchell aside in the hallway. You got dealt a tough hand, Mitchell. New shooter, unknown capability, swamp terrain. Keep her toward the rear of formation. Don't let her slow you down. She might surprise us, Master Sergeant. Or she might get someone tagged out because she can't keep pace. Brennan glanced back toward where Kira was checking her rifle case. I've seen 100 hotshots come through here thinking their fancy gear would compensate for lack of field experience. They never last when reality introduces itself. Mitchell didn't argue, but as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that Brennan was missing something. The way Kira moved, the way she carried herself. There was a stillness to her that didn't come from basic training or even advanced schools. It came from places where movement meant death and stillness meant survival. That evening, long after the base had settled into its nighttime rhythm, Kira sat on her bunk with the rifle case open before her. Her hands moved with reverent care as she disassembled the weapon piece by piece. The Chaytak M200 intervention was already legendary among precision shooters. Bolt action, or a Cheyenne tactical cartridge, effective range out to 2,500 meters in optimal conditions. But this one had been heavily modified. Titanium components where steel used to live. Custom trigger assembly. A scope that cost more than most cars. This wasn't just a weapon, it was an extension of her body. Her will made into cold steel and calculated mathematics. She worked the cleaning rod through the barrel with practiced precision, applied oil to the bolt carrier, checked every surface for wear or damage. The ritual was almost meditative, a moment of control and certainty in an uncertain world. You really love that thing, don't you? The voice belonged to Corporal Natalie Sterling, a communications specialist with sharp eyes and an easy smile. She'd claimed the bunk next to Kira's and had been watching the cleaning ritual with obvious curiosity. Kira didn't look up. I trust something that's never failed me. Has it saved your life? A pause. Then almost too quiet to hear multiple times. The weight in those two words made Sterling hesitate. She wanted to ask more. Wanted to know where this mysterious woman had come from, what she'd seen, what stories lived behind those calm gray-green eyes. But something in Kira's tone built a wall that was clearly marked with no trespassing signs. Well, good luck tomorrow. Bayou Phantom is supposed to be brutal. You'll need every advantage you can get. Kira finally looked at her. For the first time, Sterling saw something beyond the calm surface. Determination sharpened to a razor's edge, forged in fires Sterling couldn't imagine. Thank you, but it won't be luck. The Black Hawk helicopter cut through the humid pre-dawn air at 0545. Inside the cargo bay, 15 soldiers sat in 2 rows facing each other. Faces already painted with green and black camouflage that made them look like swamp spirits. Equipment secured tight. Every buckle checked twice. Every magazine counted. Every piece of gear exactly where muscle memory expected it. Kira sat in the back corner, rifle secured vertically between her knees, eyes closed. To anyone watching, she might have appeared to be sleeping, a rookie mistake before combat insertion. But Staff Sergeant Mitchell, sitting across from her, noticed the slight movement of her lips. She was counting, calculating, running numbers through her head like a living computer. Distance calculations, wind speed at various altitudes, humidity's effect on bullet trajectory, temperature gradients, Coriolis effect, spin drift, every variable that could affect a shot being processed, categorized, filed away for instant recall when needed. 30 seconds. The pilot's voice crackled through the internal comm system. Mitchell leaned forward and tapped Kira's boot. You ready for this? She opened her eyes, those unsettling gray-green eyes that seemed to see through everything. Always. Remember, stay with the formation. Don't go wandering off, trying to be a hero. In the swamp, separation means death. Understood, Staff Sergeant. The helicopter suddenly flared nose up, dropping altitude rapidly. Through the open side doors, they could see the bayou spread out below them like a green carpet dotted with black water. Mist rose from the swamps in ghostly columns, reducing visibility to less than 100 meters. Perfect conditions for an ambush. Green light. Go, go, go. Fast ropes deployed from both sides. One by one, soldiers grabbed the thick ropes and slid down, boots hitting muddy ground with wet splashes. The insertion took exactly 45 seconds. Textbook perfect. When Kira's boots touched ground, warm swamp water immediately rose to her ankles. The smell hit like a physical thing, rotting vegetation, stagnant water, humidity so thick every breath felt like drinking hot soup. The temperature was already pushing 90 degrees and the sun had barely cleared the horizon. The jungle around them was alive with sound. Insects buzzed in clouds. Birds screamed territorial warnings. Somewhere close, an alligator bellowed its morning greeting. The cacophony created a natural acoustic screen that would mask their movement, but also mask enemy movement toward them. Bravo Platoon Delta formation, move out. Mitchell's whisper barely registered over the ambient noise. They advanced in tactical formation. 2-point men up front, 3 in the middle including Kira, 2 rear security. Each soldier maintained 5-meter spacing. Weapons in low-ready position, eyes constantly scanning assigned sectors. Kira moved like she'd been born in the swamp. Her steps were placed carefully, testing ground before committing weight. She avoided anything that would crack or splash unnecessarily. Her rifle was held in perfect ready position, not so high it would catch on branches, not so low she couldn't engage quickly. Mitchell watched her from his position in the middle of formation. He'd seen hundreds of soldiers on their first swamp patrol. Most stumbled, made noise, fought the terrain. This woman moved through it like water flowing downhill, taking the path of least resistance, leaving barely a trace. Maybe she wasn't lying about that classified experience. After 40 minutes of slow, careful movement through increasingly dense vegetation, Alpha Platoon's radio transmission crackled across the net. All elements halt. Alpha has visual contact with observation tower. Distance 800 meters, bearing 020. One counter sniper confirmed in elevated position. Every soldier in both platoons froze in place, some mid-step, becoming instant statues in the green chaos. Captain Pierce's voice came from the command post. Alpha, you are cleared to neutralize the target. Bravo, maintain overwatch and security on Alpha's eastern flank. Roger that, Overwatch. Through breaks in the vegetation, Bravo Platoon could just barely make out Alpha's movements. Shadowy figures maneuvering through swamp water and palmettos toward better firing positions. Garrett Wolf found cover behind a massive fallen cypress tree covered in moss and fungus. He carefully mounted his M110 semi-automatic sniper system on the natural rest, adjusted his scope, began his breathing cycle. Alpha 6, this is Alpha 2-1, and Wolf's voice came across the radio using his tactical call sign. I have partial visual on the target. Vegetation is blocking approximately 70% of the tower structure. I do not have a clear shot at this time. Can you reposition? Brennan asked. Negative. Any closer, and I'll be well inside his engagement range. This is as good as it gets. Silence on the radio while Brennan weighed options. Take your time. Wait for wind movement to clear the foliage. You'll get your shot. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The entire platoon remained frozen. Muscles cramping, sweat pouring down faces, insects biting any exposed skin. This was the reality of swamp warfare. 90% waiting, 10% terror. Finally, Wolf saw his opportunity. A gust of wind shifted branches. Not a perfect shot, but good enough. He fired. The 7.62 millimeter training round left the barrel at 2,700 feet per second. But in that 800-meter distance, it had to pass through air thick as syrup, navigate past tree branches, punch through thermal layers that bent trajectory like a prism bending light. The round impacted 30 centimeters to the left of the target, striking the wooden tower structure with a visible puff of paint. Miss, hostile shooter active, engaging alpha element. Simulated gunfire erupted from the tower. Blank rounds mixed with compressed air markers. 3 soldiers in Alpha Platoon suddenly had their vest sensors light up red. Killed in action. Damn it! Brennan's voice exploded over the radio. Alpha, fall back. Reposition to secondary covered position. Bravo, do you have visual? Mitchell scanned desperately through his sector, trying to catch a glimpse of the tower through the impossible tangle of vegetation. Negative Alpha 6, same situation. Too much vegetation blocking line of sight. More simulated fire from the tower. Another Alpha soldier's vest lit up red. The exercise was rapidly turning into a disaster. That's when Kira moved, without saying a word, without asking permission. She broke away from Bravo's formation. Mitchell saw her moving laterally through the swamp, angling away from the group in what seemed like completely the wrong direction. Dalton, what the hell are you doing? Mitchell hissed into the radio. Get back to your position. She didn't respond, just kept moving with that same fluid precision, like she knew exactly where she was going and why. 50 meters later, she found what she'd been looking for. A minuscule elevation in terrain. Nothing more than a slight rise where ancient tree roots had created a natural platform, maybe 2 feet above the surrounding swamp. To anyone else, it would have been meaningless. But Kira saw it for what it was. Geometry. She dropped into prone position. Muddy water splashed up around her. With practiced movements that spoke of thousands of repetitions, she deployed her bipod and began setting up her firing position. Dalton, you are out of position and acting without orders. Brennan's voice was sharp with anger and concern. Return to formation immediately. Visual confirmed. Kira's voice was calm, clinical, as if she were commenting on weather conditions. Distance 860 meters. Crosswind from east 3 knots. Relative humidity 87%. Temperature 92 degrees Fahrenheit. Pause. I have the shot. You do not have the shot. Brennan was nearly shouting now. Nobody has that shot. The target is 90% obscured by vegetation. Kira didn't respond. She was already in her zone. That mental space where the world narrowed to nothing but numbers, physics, and cold certainty. Through her thermal scope, she could see the tower as a vague heat signature through the jungle mist. The counter-sniper was almost completely hidden by foliage. Only the very tip of his rifle barrel was visible, and even that was intermittent as branches swayed. But she wasn't aiming at what she could see. She was aiming at where she knew that he had to be. 860 meters. That meant 12.8 mils of elevation adjustment to compensate for bullet drop. But humidity would slow the round slightly. Add another 0.3 mils. Crosswind at 3 knots from the east. That's 2.1 mils of windage adjustment. But wind speed probably increased with altitude through the canopy. Better make it 2.4 to be safe. Her fingers moved on the scope turrets with precision born of 10,000 practice sessions. Each audible click represented 0.1 mils of adjustment, the difference between a hit and a miss at this distance. Breathing came next. She needed to slow her heart rate, control oxygen flow, eliminate any tremor or shake. 4 counts in. Hold for 7, 8 counts out. Repeat. Her heart rate dropped from 70 beats per minute to 50, 48, 45. Perfect. The world around her ceased to exist. No more swamp, no more heat, no more insects, no more angry voices on the radio demanding she abort. Just her, the rifle, and the target. Her finger found the trigger. The first stage of pressure taken up. 3 pounds. She could feel the glass-smooth break point waiting at 5 pounds 2 ounces. Gradual pressure. No jerking, no yanking. Just steady, inevitable pressure like tectonic plates sliding against each other. The shot broke clean. The 408 Chaytak training round left the barrel at 3,500 feet per second. For more than 3 full seconds, it flew through the air. time enough to cross layers of humid atmosphere, navigate crosswinds, compensate for gravity's pull, account for the Earth's rotation beneath it. At the observation tower 860 meters away, the defender's vest suddenly lit up bright red. Center mass hit. Kill shot. Neutralization confirmed. The exercise observer's voice boomed over the radio net. Tower 1 defender is KIE. Confirmed center mass impact at distance 862 meters through dense vegetation obstruction. The entire radio net went silent for exactly 5 seconds. Then chaos erupted. Holy, someone in Alpha Platoon broke radio discipline, unable to contain the reaction. Mitchell stood frozen mouth, literally hanging open. That's impossible. That shot is physically impossible. Wolf, still behind his firing position, looked like he'd just watched someone walk on water. His face had gone pale beneath the camouflage paint. No way, she got lucky. That was a fluke shot. But Brennan knew better. He'd been in combat long enough to know the difference between luck and skill. And what he'd just witnessed was skill at a level he'd never seen before. Specialist Dalton. Captain Pierce's voice came over the radio. For the first time, there was something in his tone that hadn't been there before. Respect. Confirm your shooter ID for the record. Hawkeye Bravo Platoon. Shot confirmed. Outstanding work. All elements continue mission. Alpha, you're back in the fight. Kira calmly broke down her firing position, secured her rifle, moved back toward Bravo Platoon's formation as if nothing extraordinary had happened. As if she hadn't just made a shot that would be talked about in Cypress Ridge for years to come. When she rejoined the formation, Mitchell was waiting. His expression was a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been awe. How did you? He couldn't even finish the question. She met his eyes with that same infuriating calm. I didn't see him, Staff Sergeant. I calculated where he had to be based on tower construction, human ergonomics, and optimal defensive positioning. Then I adjusted for environmental factors and took the shot. You calculated. Mitchell shook his head slowly. That's not how shooting works. That's exactly how shooting works at extended range, Staff Sergeant. You just don't usually have to account for this much environmental interference. She moved past him, taking her position in the formation as if they'd been discussing lunch options rather than an impossible shot through dense jungle at nearly 900 meters. Mitchell stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Behind them, he could hear Alpha Platoon regrouping. Ahead, 2 more towers waited, and somewhere in Kira Dalton's calm, gray-green eyes was a story he suddenly desperately wanted to understand. But that would have to wait. Right now, they had a mission to complete. As Bravo Platoon pushed deeper into the bayou, Mitchell couldn't shake one thought. Who the hell was this woman, and where had she really come from? Those questions would be answered soon enough. But first, they'd have to survive the fog. Dawn broke over Cypress Ridge on the second day of Operation Bayou Phantom with all the subtlety of a funeral shroud. One moment there was darkness. The next gray light filtered through air so thick with moisture it felt solid. But this morning brought something different. Fog. Not the thin morning mist that burned off with sunrise. This was dense, oppressive fog that rolled across the bayou like a living thing. Visibility dropped to 15 meters. Then 10, then 5. The world became a wall of white punctuated by dark shapes that might have been trees or might have been threats. Staff Sergeant Mitchell stood at the edge of Bravo Platoon's patrol base and watched the fog swallow landmarks that had been clearly visible the night before. The swamp, already treacherous, had just become deadly. His radio crackled. Master Sergeant Brennan's voice cut through the static. All elements, this is Alpha 6. Weather conditions have created a tactical challenge. Fog density is reducing visibility to near zero. However, mission timeline remains unchanged per Overwatch. Mitchell keyed his mic. Alpha 6 Bravo 6. Recommend we delay movement until conditions improve. Current visibility makes navigation and threat identification nearly impossible. Bravo 6 understood, but Captain Pierce has made it clear real combat doesn't wait for perfect weather. We adapt and overcome. Behind Mitchell, Kira Dalton was already breaking down her overnight position. She moved with the same methodical precision she applied to everything. Sleeping bag rolled and secured. Rifle cleaned and loaded. Gear checked and rechecked. When she approached Mitchell, her gray-green eyes studied the fog with an expression that wasn't concern. It was calculation. Staff Sergeant, the book limits their observation capability as much as ours. Mitchell turned to look at her. Explain. The tower defenders rely on thermal optics and visual identification. This fog will degrade both. Their effective engagement range just dropped from 800 meters to maybe 200. We can close distance without being detected, get into positions that wouldn't be safe in clear conditions. That's assuming we don't walk into an ambush because we can't see 10 feet in front of us. Then we move carefully. She paused. The fog isn't an obstacle, Staff Sergeant. It's an advantage, if we use it correctly. Mitchell wanted to argue. Every instinct said this was dangerous thinking, but the logic was sound, and something about the calm certainty in her voice made him trust her assessment. All right, but you stay in formation this time. No unauthorized movements. Yes, Staff Sergeant. 2 hours later, both platoons had advanced 4 kilometers through terrain that made the previous day's movement look easy. The fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it had gotten thicker. Water dripped from every surface. Sound was muffled and distorted. Visibility remained at 10 meters maximum. They reached a natural choke point where the swamp narrowed to a 100-meter-wide corridor of open water dotted with cypress knees and fallen logs. This was where Tower 2 should be located. But should be and is were two different things when you couldn't see 50 meters. Brennan's voice came over the radio. Overwatch Alpha 6. We have general location for Tower 2. Distance approximately 2,000 meters based on dead reckoning. Elevation approximately 80 feet above our current position. Cannot confirm exact coordinates due to fog density. Captain Pierce responded from the field command post. Roger Alpha 6. Close to effective range and engage when ready. There was a pause. Then, Overwatch 2,000 meters in this fog is not effective range for any weapon system we have. We can't see the target. We can't confirm position. We can't. Then get creative, Alpha 6. Pierce's tone left no room for debate. You have assets that proved yesterday that conventional wisdom doesn't always apply. Use them. Another pause. Then Brennan keyed his mic again, and there was something new in his voice. Not quite respect, not quite acceptance, but acknowledgement. Bravo 6, you copy that. Roger Alpha 6. Mitchell responded. I assume Overwatch is referring to Hawkeye. Affirmative. Can your specialist make a shot at 2,000 meters in near-zero visibility? Every eye in both platoons turned to Kira. She had already moved to a slight elevation, another one of those tiny geographic advantages that seemed invisible to everyone except her. She was setting up her rifle, deploying the bipod, pulling out her rangefinder and anemometer. Mitchell approached her position. Well, can you make this shot? She was looking through her thermal scope, sweeping the area where the tower should be. The fog created a whiteout effect even on thermal imaging. Nothing was clear, nothing was certain. I can't see the tower. Mitchell felt his stomach drop. So that's a no. I didn't say that. She pulled out her waterproof notepad and began sketching. Based on our march pace and direction, the tower should be here. She marked a point on her crude map. Terrain elevation suggests it's positioned on this ridgeline for optimal observation coverage. Standard military doctrine would place it here at the highest point for maximum field of view. You're guessing. I'm calculating based on probability and doctrine. She pulled out her laser rangefinder and took measurements on several landmarks she could barely see through the fog. That tree line is at 1,920 meters. The ridge elevation beyond it adds approximately another 80 meters of distance. Tower should be at roughly 2,000 meters, give or take 20. Mitchell shook his head. Even if you're right about distance, you can't see the target. You're talking about shooting at a ghost. I'm talking about shooting at where the ghost has to be. She began making calculations in her notepad, complex mathematical formulas that looked like physics textbook equations. 2,000 meters. Fog will increase humidity to near saturation. Figure 96%. That will slow the round by approximately 12%. Temperature is 85 degrees. Barometric pressure is low due to the weather system. Wind is nearly calm at ground level, but probably 5 to 7 knots at elevation where the tower sits above the fog bank. You're making a lot of assumptions. I'm working with available data and filling gaps with educated extrapolation based on meteorology, topography, and ballistic physics. She looked up at him. It's not a guaranteed hit. I'd estimate 70% probability of success, maybe less. 70%? Mitchell almost laughed. Most snipers won't take a shot unless they're 95% certain. Most snipers aren't operating in conditions that make certainty impossible. She returned her attention to the scope. The question is, do you want to try something with 70% chance of success or guarantee failure by doing nothing? Mitchell thought about that for exactly 3 seconds. Then he keyed his radio. Alpha 6, Bravo 6. Hawkeye believes she can make the shot. Probability of success approximately 70%. Garrett Wolf's voice cut in, dripping with sarcasm. 70%? Are you kidding me? That's not a shot. That's a prayer. Wolf, shut it, Brennan snapped. Then to Mitchell, 70% is better odds than anything else we've got. Tell her to take the shot, but make sure she understands if she misses, we give away our position and they'll light us up. Mitchell relayed the message. Kira nodded once. Understood. She had already settled into her shooting position. Body perfectly aligned behind the rifle, breathing controlled, heart rate dropping into the optimal zone. But before she made final adjustments, she did something unexpected. She turned her head toward where Alpha Platoon was positioned and raised her voice just enough to carry. Master Sergeant Brennan, how did you handle fog shots in Desert Storm? Silence on the radio for a moment. Then Brennan's voice came back slower now, more thoughtful. We didn't have fancy thermal optics back in '91. When fog rolled in, we used sound ranging techniques. Explain. You listen for ambient noise patterns, wind moving through structures, metal expanding in heat, echo timing off hard surfaces. Before laser rangefinders, we used our ears to calculate distance. He paused. Why booming? Because sometimes the old ways work when the new technology fails. Kira closed her eyes. Let the ambient sound wash over her. The fog changed acoustics, made everything muffled. But their faint, almost imperceptible, the sound of wind whistling through metal framework. The slight creak of wood under stress. Direction and distance encoded in frequencies most people would never notice. She opened her eyes and made a small adjustment to her calculations. Thank you, Master Sergeant. That confirms my estimate. Mitchell saw something pass across Brennan's face in the Tentanigaman. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. The old sergeant was looking at Kira differently now. Range 2,000 meters, Kira said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Elevation 17.1 miles. Windage 4.8 mils right. Humidity compensation 0.8 additional elevation. Temperature 85 degrees. Ammunition temperature probably 90 after carrying it in this heat. Velocity increase approximately 20 feet per second. Reduces drop by 0.2 mils. Her fingers made microscopic adjustments to the scope turrets. Click, click, click. The entire platoon had gone silent. Even the jungle seemed to hold its breath. Final firing solution, 17 mils elevation, 4.8 mils right windage. She settled her cheek against the stock. Her finger found the trigger. First stage pressure taken up smoothly. Through the scope, she could see nothing but fog. No tower, no target, no confirmation that anything was even out there. Just mathematics, just physics, just faith in numbers that had never failed her before. Her breathing stopped at the natural respiratory pause. Her heart beat once, twice. On the third beat between systole and diastole in that microsecond, when her body was perfectly still, she pressed the trigger. The shot broke clean. The .408 Chaytak round left the barrel at 3,500 feet per second, spinning at 180,000 RPM. It climbed into the fog bank, disappearing from sight almost immediately. For 4 full seconds, nothing happened. 4 seconds that felt like 4 years. Then from somewhere in the fog, 2,000 meters away, a voice over the loudspeaker system, neutralization confirmed. Tower 2 Defender is KIA. Center mass impact at range 2,006 meters. The radio net exploded. Did she just? That's not possible. That's physically impossible. Even Brennan sounded shaken. Overwatch confirmed that call. You're saying she hit? Affirmative, Alpha 6. Captain Pierce's voice held undisguised amazement. The tower observer reports center mass impact. The shot came through the fog like a surgical strike. Tower 2 is neutralized. Pierce paused. Then Specialist Dalton, that is officially the most impressive shot in Cypress Ridge's recorded history. I don't have words for what I just witnessed. Outstanding work. But Kira wasn't listening to the praise. She was already breaking down her position. Securing gear, preparing to move to the next objective. Because for her, this wasn't exceptional. This was just what she did. What she'd always done. What she'd been trained to do in places where failure meant her teammates died. This was Tuesday. Mitchell caught up to her, breathing hard from the adrenaline. That was incredible, you have to know, and that was incredible. It was adequate. The timing was tighter than I would have liked. Tighter than... Mitchell laughed despite himself. You just made a shot that shouldn't be possible, and you're critiquing your timing. There's always room for improvement, Staff Sergeant. In the distance through the fog, they could hear Alpha Platoon regrouping, and from somewhere in that white void came Garrett Wolf's voice, flat and emotionless. She cheated, had to have cheated somehow. But Master Sergeant Brennan's response carried across the swamp with the weight of 32 years of military experience. Son, I've been shooting since before you were born. I've seen combat in 3 countries and trained hundreds of marksmen. What that woman just did wasn't cheating. It was mastery. And if you can't recognize the difference, you're not half the shooter you think you are. That night, after both platoons had established a defensive perimeter in a clearing protected by dense palmetto thickets, Brennan found Kira sitting alone with her back against a massive oak tree. She was field stripping her rifle by feel alone. No light, no need for it. Her hands knew every component like a pianist knew keys. He approached slowly, making noise so she'd hear him coming. In the darkness, her eyes reflected starlight like a cat's. Mind if I sit, Specialist? It's a free country, Master Sergeant. Brennan lowered himself to the ground with the careful movements of a man whose joints remembered every hard landing, every forced march, every price that combat extracted from the body. For a moment, neither spoke. Just 2 soldiers sitting in the darkness, listening to the bayou breathe around them. That technique you used today, Brennan finally said. The sound ranging. Where'd you learn about that? My instructor in advanced training. He was old school, said the fundamentals never change, only the tools. Smart man. What else did he teach you? Kira was quiet for a long moment, her hands continuing their mechanical work on the rifle. He taught me that technology assists, but a skill survives, that batteries die and optics fail, but math is eternal, that the difference between coming home and coming home in a box is whether you understand the why behind the how. Brennan nodded slowly. He sounds like someone I knew once. Guy named Patterson. Taught me to shoot in 1988. Korean war vet. Mean as a snake and twice as patient. He paused. Said almost the same things you just did. Good teachers echo through time, Master Sergeant. They do. Brennan watched her reassemble the rifle with practiced precision. Can I ask you something, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to? You can ask. How old were you when you made your first combat shot? The question hung in the humid air. Kira's hands stopped moving for just a second, then resumed their work. 21. Denied area operation. High-value target moving through a civilian market. 830 meters in urban environment with variable crosswinds and thermal distortion from cooking fires. Did you make the shot? Yes. How many more after that? 46. Brennan did the math silently. 47 total confirmed kills. She'd mentioned that number before. At 24 years old. That meant 3 years of sustained combat operations at the highest level. The kind of operations that didn't appear in official records. Who'd you lose? The question came out softer than he'd intended. Kira finished reassembling the rifle, set it carefully across her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that made Brennan's chest hurt. 6 teammates, best operators I ever worked with. Delta Force personnel whose names will never appear on any memorial. They died because someone up the chain of command sold our position. Because intelligence got traded for political favors. Because in Washington, our lives were worth less than their careers. She turned to look at him directly. I was separated from the main element when the ambush happened. I heard them die over the radio. Heard every word, every scream, every moment when another voice went silent forever. I made it to the extraction point alone. 6 shots. 6 enemy soldiers who'd made the mistake of following me. 6 perfect kills that meant nothing because my team was already gone. Brennan felt like he'd been punched in the chest. He knew that particular flavor of pain. The survivor's guilt that never quite healed. The weight of living when others didn't. Is that why you came to Cypress Ridge? I came here because I needed somewhere quiet. Somewhere the stakes were lower. Somewhere I could take a breath without calculating fields of fire. She looked back out into the darkness. I thought maybe if I was somewhere safe, somewhere that didn't matter, I could figure out how to be human again, instead of just a weapon someone points at targets. But the weapon followed you anyway. The weapon is me, Master Sergeant. I can't separate the two. I've tried. They sat in silence for another moment. Then Brennan spoke, and his voice carried a vulnerability Kira hadn't heard before. I lost someone too. February 26, 1991. Desert Storm. My best friend since basic training. Guy named Thomas Wolfe. Kira's head snapped toward him. Wolfe. Yeah, Garrett's father. Thomas and I went through everything together. Airborne school, Ranger training, 3 years at Fort Benning. When Desert Storm kicked off, we deployed together. Spotter and shooter, the best team in our unit. Brennan's hands were shaking slightly. Kira noticed but didn't comment. We were tracking an Iraqi artillery position. Got the coordinates called. In the strike, we're moving to exfiltration. Then Thomas stepped on a mine that shouldn't have been there. Chinese Type 72. Anti-personnel. He had maybe 2 minutes before he bled out. The old sergeant's voice broke. He used those 2 minutes to tell me about his son. Garrett was 6 months old. Thomas had only seen him once before deployment. He made me promise. Take care of my boy Ray. Make sure he knows his father loved him. Make sure he becomes a good man. And have you, Kira asked quietly, taken care of him? I tried. God knows I tried. But Garrett grew up angry. Angry his father wasn't there. Angry at the world. And every time I tried to reach him, tried to teach him, tried to honor that promise, he pushed back. Said I wasn't his father. Said I had no right to tell him anything. Brennan wiped at his eyes roughly. So I backed off. Let him find his own way. Watched him become one hell of a shooter, but also watched him become arrogant and territorial in everything Thomas wouldn't have wanted. And I didn't know how to fix it without making it worse. That's not your fault, Master Sergeant. Isn't it? I made a promise to a dying man, and I failed. Kira was quiet for a long moment. Then my team leader's last words to me were, get to extraction, live. Make sure this meant something. I've been trying to figure out how to do that for 6 months. I don't have an answer yet. Maybe we're both trying to carry debts we can't repay. Maybe. Kira stood up slowly, shouldering her rifle. Or maybe the way we repay them is by teaching the next generation not to make our mistakes. By passing on what we learned so someone else comes home to their family. Brennan looked up at her with something like hope in his eyes. You really believe that I have to, Master Sergeant, because if I don't, then all of this, all the killing and all the death, all the nightmares was for nothing. And I can't accept that. She walked away into the darkness, leaving Brennan sitting against the oak tree with tears on his weathered face and the ghost of a promise he'd made 33 years ago. The next morning brought clear skies and the final objective. Tower 3 sat on elevated terrain overlooking a simulated command compound. Intelligence reports indicated 2 defenders with advanced thermal optics. They'd been monitoring radio traffic. They knew about Hawkeye, and they were specifically hunting for her position. Captain Pierce's briefing was terse. Tower 3 is your final obstacle. Once neutralized, you have clear access to the primary objective. However, the defenders have been alerted to your presence. They know Specialist Dalton is out there, and they're actively trying to counter her. Expect them to be searching likely firing positions. Mitchell felt cold despite the morning heat. Overwatch that changes the tactical situation significantly. If they're actively counter-sniping, we need different tactics. Agreed, V. I'm opening the floor to suggestions. All call signs. What are your recommendations? Wolf's voice cut in immediately. Overwatch, this is Alpha 2-1. Recommendation, we use conventional tactics. multiple shooters engaging from different angles to split their attention. Hawkeye's solo shots aren't going to work when they're specifically looking for her. Explain your reasoning. Sir, she's been lucky twice, but luck runs out. These defenders know what to watch for now. They'll be scanning for her thermal signature, tracking for specific rifle reports, monitoring for muzzle flash. If she takes another miracle shot and misses, they'll triangulate her position in seconds and light her up. There was logic to the argument. Conventional tactics often work better than individual heroics when facing prepared enemies. Bravo 6, your assessment. Mitchell looked at Kira. She was studying the tower through her scope, silent as always. Stand by overwatch. He moved to her position. You heard all that. Wolf's not entirely wrong. They're ready for you this time. Every advantage you had before surprise, unconventional approach is gone. They know you're out there, and they know you're dangerous. Your point, Staff Sergeant. My point is, maybe we should listen to him this time. Use multiple shooters, standard suppression tactics. Don't put yourself out there as a lone target. Kira lowered her scope. Do you want to take this tower, or do you want to feel better about using conventional tactics? I want to complete the mission without getting you tagged out. Those two goals aren't mutually exclusive. She gestured toward the tower. Look at the structure. Reinforced walls, multiple firing ports, overlapping sectors of fire. If you send multiple shooters, they'll detect the first position, suppress it, while the second shooter tries to find an angle, then suppress that one too. Meanwhile, their backup calls in reinforcements, and this entire sector gets flooded. Quick reaction force isn't part of this exercise. Are you certain, or are you assuming that because it hasn't happened yet, they changed the rules when they made this tower harder? What makes you think they won't change them again? Mitchell had no answer for that. Give me 15 minutes, Kira said. Let me study their pattern, understand their behavior. Then I'll know if I can make the shot. And if you can't, then we do it Wolf's way. But let me look first. For the next 15 minutes, Kira studied Tower 3 with intensity that bordered on supernatural. She watched the slight movements visible through firing ports, tracked the rhythm of their observation patterns, noted the thermal bloom that indicated where heat was concentrating. She wasn't just looking at the tower. She was reading it like a book written in a language only she understood. Finally, she called Mitchell over. They're rotating observation every 43 seconds. Defender 1 watches left sector while Defender 2 watches right. Then they swap. It's disciplined, professional, exactly what they should be doing. Okay, which means there's a 2-second window during the transition when both defenders are looking away from their firing ports while they communicate and swap positions. Mitchell felt his stomach drop. You're going to shoot during a 2-second window. That's not insane, that's precise. She checked her watch. Their next rotation happens in approximately 90 seconds. I'll take Defender 1 during the transition. Before Defender 2 realizes what happened, I'll relocate 40 meters to a secondary position. From there, I'll take Defender 2 within 15 seconds. 2 shots, 2 different positions, 2 defenders, all within 17 seconds, actually. That's how long before their backup protocol activates. Mitchell stared at her. If you miss either shot, I won't miss. Before Mitchell could respond, a new voice cut across the radio. Master Sergeant Brennan. Bravo 6 Alpha 6, I've been monitoring this conversation. I'm moving 2 of my shooters into overwatch positions to support Hawkeye's approach. Alpha 6, I don't think. Not a suggestion, Mitchell. If Specialist Dalton is willing to put herself at risk, the least we can do is provide supporting fire if it goes sideways. There was a pause. Then, and Wolf, you're one of those overwatch positions. Get moving. Across the swamp, Garrett Wolf felt something twist in his chest. Brennan was trusting him. Actually trusting him with a critical mission. The same Brennan who'd spent years treating him like a liability. Roger that, Alpha 6, moving to position. Kira set up her primary firing position behind a fallen tree that gave her a clear sight line to the tower. 1,500 meters, well within her effective range. She could see the defenders' vague shapes moving behind the reinforced walls. 60 seconds to rotation, she said quietly. Mitchell crouched beside her binoculars trained on the tower. His mouth was dry. His heart was hammering. This was insane. This was impossible. But he'd watched her make 2 impossible shots already. 45 seconds. Wolf reached his overwatch position, set up his M110. He still didn't believe she could do this. But if she failed, he'd provide covering fire, because that's what soldiers did. They covered each other. 30 seconds. Kira's breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped into that optimal zone where her body became a stable platform. 15 seconds. The world narrowed to a tunnel. Tower, crosshairs, target. 10 seconds. Finger on trigger. First stage pressure taken up. 5 seconds. Through the binoculars, Mitchell saw both defenders simultaneously step back from their firing ports. The transition moment. Now, the shot broke clean, 1,500 meters. The round crossed the distance in just over a second and a half. Defender 1 neutralized, but Kira was already moving. She grabbed the rifle, sprinted 40 meters to her left, while carrying 70 pounds of gear, dropped into a new position behind a massive cypress tree and was setting up before Defender 2 even realized what had happened. She found him in her scope, panicking, trying to locate her original firing position, keying his radio for backup. Second shot, same perfect technique, same controlled breathing, same absolute certainty. The round took him center mass before he even knew where she was. Defender 2 neutralized. Tower 3 is clear. Mitchell checked his watch. Total elapsed time 14 seconds. The radio net went silent for a heartbeat. Then Brennan's voice carrying something Mitchell had never heard before. Genuine awe. Bravo 6, did she just... Yes, Alpha 6, yes she did. Captain Pierce's voice came over the net. Specialist Dalton, I don't even have words for what I just witnessed. 2 shots, 2 different positions, 2 defenders eliminated in under 15 seconds. That's some of the finest tactical shooting I've ever seen in 30 years of service. But Kira wasn't listening. She was already breaking down her position, securing gear, preparing to move. Because this wasn't exceptional. This was just what she did. Wolf, watching from his overwatch position, felt everything he thought he knew about shooting collapse around him. She wasn't just skilled. She was operating at a level he'd never even imagined existed. And somewhere deep in his chest, he felt the first crack in the armor of arrogance he'd been wearing his entire military career. That evening, after the mission ended with successful HVT elimination and extraction, Kira was summoned to Captain Pierce's office. Also present were Master Sergeant Brennan and a man in civilian clothes who looked like every intelligence contractor Kira had ever met. Forgettable features, expensive watch eyes that missed nothing. Specialist Dalton, please sit. Pierce gestured to a chair. This is Agent Williams. He's with, well, let's just say he has questions about your background. The civilian leaned forward. We know you were with JSOC. We know your last mission ended with 6 KIA. What we don't know is why someone with your capabilities is at a training base instead of continuing operational work. Kira's expression didn't change. I requested reassignment for personal reasons. Personal reasons you're not going to elaborate on. Correct. Specialist Dalton, you have skills the military desperately needs. We're prepared to offer you advanced training slots, fast-track promotion, eventual assignment to no. Williams blinked. Excuse me. I appreciate the offer, but I'm declining. I came to Cypress Ridge because I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could process some things, somewhere I could figure out who I am outside of combat operations. That's a waste of, Williams started to say, but Brennan cut him off. A waste of what national assets? The old sergeant's voice was hard as iron. She's served where she was needed for 3 years. She's done things she'll never talk about in places that don't officially exist. She's killed 47 human beings to protect operational objectives and her teammates. And at the end of that service, she watched her entire team die because someone up the chain made a mistake. Brennan stood up, and there was steel in his posture. So yes, she understands responsibility and service. She's paid those dues. And what she needs now, what she's earned, is some time to remember what it's like to be human, instead of just a weapon someone points at targets. Williams opened his mouth to argue, but Pierce raised a hand. Agent Williams, I think we're done here. Specialist Dalton has made her position clear. We can't force her into operational assignments. After Williams left clearly unhappy, Pierce turned to Kira. For what it's worth, I agree with Brennan. You've earned the right to choose your path. Thank you, sir. As Kira stood to leave, Brennan followed her into the hallway. Specialist. A word. They walked in silence until they were outside, away from listening ears. I wanted to say something, Brennan began, about what you said last night, about teaching the next generation, about making the sacrifices mean something. Yes, Master Sergeant, I think you're right, and I think maybe that's what I've been missing. I've been so focused on my promise to Thomas on taking care of Garrett that I forgot the best way to honor the dead is to make sure the living don't repeat our mistakes. He paused, looking out across the base. I've got 6 months until mandatory retirement. I was planning to just coast through it, but maybe instead I should focus on actually training people, passing on what 3 decades taught me, making sure the next generation has every tool they need to come home. Kira felt something warm in her chest. Not quite hope, but close. I think that would honor your friend's memory better than anything else you could do. Yeah. Brennan smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Yeah, I think you're right. As he walked away, Kira stood in the Louisiana twilight and felt for the first time in 6 months like maybe she'd found something worth staying for. Not just quiet, not just safety, purpose. The ghosts were still there. They always would be. But maybe the way to honor them wasn't to run from what she was. Maybe it was to use what she'd learned to make sure other people's ghosts never had to exist. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had pulled the trigger 47 times, the same hands that had held dying teammates, the same hands that cleaned her rifle with reverent precision every night. Maybe these hands could do something more than kill. Maybe they could teach. Maybe they could save. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Turned to see Garrett Wolf standing there, hands shoved in his pockets, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Specialist Dalton, got a minute? What do you need, Wolf? He struggled with the words. I need to stop being an asshole and learn from the best shooter I've ever seen. If you'll teach me. Kira studied him for a long moment, saw past the arrogance to the fear underneath. The fear that he wasn't as good as he thought. The fear that everything he'd built his identity on was a lie. She'd seen that fear before, in the mirror, 6 months ago. One condition, she finally said. Name it. You stop competing with me. You start competing with yesterday's version of yourself. Can you do that? Wolf thought about it, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I can do that. Then we start tomorrow morning. 0500, be ready to work. As he walked our way, Kira allowed herself a small smile. The fog had lifted, the mission was complete, and somewhere in the Louisiana darkness, the ghosts of 6 good men were watching. Maybe finally she was doing something that would make them proud. 3 days after Operation Bayou Phantom concluded, life at Cypress Ridge settled back into its normal rhythm. PT at 0530, breakfast at 0700, equipment maintenance, administrative tasks, the endless cycle of military routine that made weeks blur together into months. But something had changed. Everyone felt it. Soldiers who'd been at the base for years suddenly found themselves questioning assumptions they'd held for their entire careers. The new specialist with the Predator's call sign had made shots that shouldn't exist outside of Hollywood movies. She'd proven that the gap between very good and exceptional was wider than any of them had imagined. For most soldiers, this was humbling, but ultimately motivating. A reminder that there was always another level to reach for. For Garrett Wolf, it was an earthquake that shattered the foundation his identity was built on. He sat in the mess hall during lunch, pushing food around his tray without eating. Around him, soldiers discussed the operation. The fog shot was already becoming legendary. 2,000 meters through zero visibility. People were calling it the greatest shot in base history. Some were saying it might be one of the greatest shots in military history, period. And every word felt like a knife in his chest. Wolf had been the company's premier marksman for 3 years. 3 consecutive years as Southeastern Region designated marksman champion. Competition medals that lined his wall, trophies that proved his worth. He'd built his entire identity around being the best shooter in Charlie Company. It was who he was, the one thing that made him special, the one thing that connected him to the father he'd never known. Thomas Wolf had been a marksman. Died in Desert Storm when Garrett was 6 months old. Every time Garrett looked through a scope, he imagined his father doing the same thing. Every perfect shot was a message across 33 years of silence. I'm like you, Dad. I'm worthy of the name. But now this woman had appeared and made him look like an amateur. Made 3 years of dedication seem like nothing. made him question whether he'd ever been actually good or just the best of a mediocre batch. His friend sitting across the table noticed his expression. "You okay, man? You've been quiet since we got back." "Fine." "You don't look fine. You look like someone killed your dog." Wolf set down his fork. "She's not that good. She got lucky. 3 times. That's statistically improbable, but it happens." "Garrett, come on. That wasn't luck." It was luck." The words came out louder than intended. Several nearby conversations stopped. Wolf lowered his voice. "Nobody shoots that well consistently. Nobody makes a 2,000-meter fog shot based on calculation alone. Nobody drops 2 targets in 14 seconds. It's not possible." His friend studied him carefully. "You know what your problem is? You can't accept that someone might be better than you. And now that you've seen it with your own eyes, it's breaking you." "I'm not broken." "No. Then why have you been sitting here for 20 minutes staring at food you're not eating, talking about luck and statistics instead of acknowledging what everyone else already knows? She's exceptional. You're very good. Those aren't mutually exclusive." Wolf wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come because deep down he knew his friend was right. And that knowledge was acid in his throat. That afternoon, Garrett Wolf did something he'd been avoiding for 6 months. He went to the storage unit off base where he kept his father's belongings. The unit was small, climate-controlled, filled with boxes his mother had given him when he turned 18. "Your father's things," she'd said. "I kept them for you. Maybe they'll help you understand who he was." Garrett had opened exactly 3 boxes in 15 years. Each time the weight of expectations and absence had been too much to bear. Today he opened a fourth. Inside was a photo album, service records, letters Thomas had written to Garrett's mother during deployment, and at the bottom, wrapped carefully in oilcloth, a rifle. Not the service weapon Thomas had carried. That had been buried with him. This was personal. A Remington 700 with a worn stock and a scope that had been top of the line in 1985. Garrett lifted it carefully. The weight felt right, the balance perfect. Balance. On the stock, carved in small letters, "Thomas J. Wolf, Marksman, First Class." He found himself reading the letters. All of them. 23 letters written in the 6 months between deployment and death. Most talked about the mission, the weather, the boredom between moments of terror. But 3 talked about shooting. In one letter, Thomas wrote, "I made a shot today that I'm proud of. 600 meters in crosswind. The spotter said it was luck. But Ray Brennan pulled me aside afterward and said, 'That wasn't luck. That was fundamental skills applied correctly. Be proud, but stay humble. The moment you think you're the best is the moment you stop improving.'" Garrett read that line 3 times. Stay humble. The moment you think you're the best is the moment you stop improving. His father had understood something Garrett had forgotten. Being good wasn't about being better than everyone else. It was about being better than you were yesterday. He kept reading. Another letter written 2 weeks before the mine that ended everything. "I've been thinking about what I want to teach our son when I get home. Not just shooting, though I'll teach him that, but the important things. Honor, humility, the understanding that real strength isn't never falling down. It's getting back up every time you do. I want him to be a good man, not just a skilled man. I hope I live long enough to show him the difference." Garrett set down the letter with shaking hands. His father had wanted to teach him humility, wanted him to understand that character mattered more than capability. And what had Garrett done instead? Built his identity entirely on capability. Become arrogant, territorial, everything his father wouldn't have wanted. He looked at the rifle again, at the worn stock that showed years of practice, at the careful maintenance that spoke of respect for the craft. His father had been a good shooter, but more importantly, he'd been a good man. And Garrett was neither. He sat in that storage unit for 2 hours, surrounded by the ghost of a man he'd never known, and finally let himself grieve. Not just for the father he'd lost, but for the person he'd become in trying to honor a memory he'd never truly understood. When he left, his eyes were red, but his mind was clear. He knew what he had to do. That evening, Garrett found Master Sergeant Brennan in the armory conducting inventory. The older man looked up as Garrett entered, and something passed across his weathered face. Recognition, maybe. Or concern. "Wolf, didn't expect to see you here." "Master Sergeant, can we talk?" Brennan set down his clipboard. Of course, what's on your mind? Garrett struggled to find the words. Finally, he just said it. Why didn't you ever tell me about my father, about what kind of man he was? Brennan's expression shifted, became careful. I tried, son, many times over the years. But every time I brought up Thomas, you shut down. Said I had no right to talk about him. That I wasn't your father and it never would be. I was wrong. I was angry and stupid and wrong. Garrett's voice cracked. I spent 15 years building an identity around being the best marksman because I thought that's what would honor his memory. But I just read his letters, and he didn't care about being the best. He cared about being good, about being humble, about character over capability. He did. Thomas was one of the finest men I ever knew. And I'm nothing like him, am I? The words came out raw, painful. I'm arrogant, territorial, mean to people who don't deserve it. I've spent 3 years being the opposite of everything he wanted for me. Brennan walked around the counter and put a hand on Garrett's shoulder. You're 33 years old. Your father died before you could walk. You've been trying to build a relationship with a ghost, and nobody can do that successfully. The fact that you're recognizing it now means you're more like him than you think. What was his last words? Really? Brennan's eyes went distant, remembering. He said, Ray, take care of my boy. Tell him his father loved him. Tell him to be a good man, not the best man. Tell him that the only competition that matters is with who you were yesterday. Garrett felt tears running down his face and didn't bother wiping them away. I've been competing with everyone except yesterday's version of myself. I know, and I should have tried harder to tell you. Should have pushed through your walls. I made a promise to a dying friend, and I let you down. No. Garrett shook his head. No, you didn't. I shut you out. I was so wrapped up in my own anger and ego that I couldn't hear what you were trying to say. They stood there for a moment, two men connected by a ghost who'd been gone for 3 decades but still shaped their lives. Specialist Dalton, Garrett finally said. She's the real deal, isn't she? She's exceptional, maybe once in a generation talent, combined with experience most shooters never get. And I've been treating her like garbage because I was threatened. Yes, I need to make that right. Brennan studied him carefully. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I should challenge her publicly, company shooting competition. Prove I'm not afraid of her, and when she beats me, because she will beat me, I'll have the humility to admit it and ask her to teach me what she knows. That's a bold move. You sure you're ready for that? No, but my father stepped on a mine 33 years ago and used his last 2 minutes to talk about me. The least I can do is spend 15 minutes being brave enough to face my own inadequacy. Brennan smiled, the first real smile Garrett had ever seen from the old sergeant when looking at him. Your father would be proud of that decision. I hope so, Master Sergeant. I really hope so. The next morning, during company formation, Garrett Wolf stepped forward and made his challenge public. Specialist Dalton, I'd like to formally challenge you to the quarterly company shooting competition. Long-range precision category. All standard rules apply. I want to see if Operation Bayou Phantom was skill or luck. Every eye in the formation turned to Kira. She stood in the back row with that same calm expression that never seemed to change. For a long moment, she didn't respond, just studied Garrett with those unsettling gray-green eyes. Then she spoke, voice carrying across the entire formation. I accept your challenge, Specialist Wolf, but with a condition. Name it. If I win, you stop undermining team cohesion with your ego. You start treating everyone in this company with the respect they deserve, and you acknowledge that your worth isn't determined by being better than other people. Garrett felt like she'd just looked into his soul and read everything written there. But he nodded. Agreed, and if I win, you admit that Bayou Phantom was partly luck, that you're good, but not superhuman. Deal. They shook hands. The formation erupted in excited murmurs. This was going to be the event of the month. The cocky champion versus the mysterious newcomer. The old guard versus the new standard. Pride versus skill. Captain Pierce restored order, but even he couldn't hide his interest. The quarterly competition is in 1 week. Both of you will have equal access to the range for practice. I expect professional conduct from everyone. Dismissed. As soldiers dispersed, Master Sergeant Brennan caught Kira aside. You know what he's doing, right? Yes, he's setting himself up for a very public failure, so that when he loses, the humility will mean something. And you're okay with being the instrument of that, Kira thought about it. My instructor used to say, sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is beat them so completely they have no choice but to reevaluate their assumptions. If losing to me helps Specialist Wolf become a better person, then it's worth the spectacle. You're a better person than most Specialist Dalton. No Master Sergeant, I'm just someone who's been broken before and learned what it takes to rebuild. I recognize the look in his eyes because I've seen it in my mirror. The week before the competition passed in a strange mixture of anticipation and preparation. Garrett trained alone mostly, pushing himself harder than he had in years, reviewing fundamentals, practicing breath control and trigger discipline, trying to strip away the arrogance and find the core skills underneath. Kira trained too, but differently. She invited Corporal Natalie Sterling to observe her sessions, explained her thought process, talked through calculations, began teaching without being asked. On the third day, Natalie asked, "Why are you showing me all this? I'm just a communications specialist." Because everyone should understand the basics of precision shooting. You never know when that knowledge might save a life. Kira paused. And because teaching helps me remember why I learned these skills in the first place. That night, Natalie heard the screaming. She'd been sleeping lightly, still getting used to the barracks environment, when the sound pulled her fully awake. It was coming from Kira's bunk. Words mixed with sobs. Names Natalie didn't recognize. Rodriguez, fall back. Stevens, where's your no, 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 Garcia, I can hear you. Hold on, I'm coming. Natalie crossed the space between their bunks and gently shook Kira's shoulder. Specialist, Kira, wake up. Kira's eyes snapped open, wild, unfocused. Her hand reached for a weapon that wasn't there. For 5 long seconds, she didn't seem to recognize where she was. Then reality crashed back. She sat up, breathing hard, covered in sweat. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Hey, no apology needed. Natalie sat on the edge of Kira's bunk. Nightmare. Always. Kira's voice was barely a whisper. 6 months and they haven't stopped. Every night I hear them dying. Hear them calling for help I couldn't give. See their faces. Your team. The ones who didn't make it. Rodriguez, Stevens, Garcia, Palmer, Kowalski, Williams. Kira said each name like a prayer. 6 of the best operators I ever worked with. Gone because someone in Washington decided intelligence was worth trading for political favors. Natalie didn't know what to say, didn't have words adequate for that kind of pain, so instead she just sat there, present, a warm body in the darkness. Sometimes that was enough. After a long silence, Kira spoke again. Do you know what the worst part is? It's not that they died. It's that I lived. I was separated from the main element when the ambush happened. Pure chance. Random positioning. I heard everything over the radio, but I couldn't help. Couldn't save them. Could only listen while they screamed for a rescue that never came. That's not your fault. Isn't it I was the best shot? The precision element. My job was to keep them safe, and I failed. You were separated by chance. You couldn't. I made it to the extraction point alone. Kira's voice was flat now, empty. 6 enemy soldiers tried to follow me. I killed all 6. Perfect shots, clean kills, proved I still had the skill. But it didn't matter. My team was already dead. All the skill in the world didn't save them. Natalie reached out and took Kira's hand. Listen to me. You survived. That's not nothing. That's not failure. That's a gift. And what you do with that gift, teaching people like me, passing on your knowledge that honors them better than dying with them ever could. You really believe that? I do, and I think deep down you do too. That's why you came to Cypress Ridge, not to hide, to rebuild, to find a way to make their sacrifice mean something. Kira was quiet for a long time. Then, thank you, Natalie. Anytime, that's what friends are for. As Natalie returned to her bunk, Kira lay back and stared at the ceiling. Maybe Natalie was right. Maybe teaching was how she honored the dead. Maybe passing on skills so the next generation came home was worth more than 47 confirmed kills. Maybe she could live with that. Competition day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, mild temperature, light winds. 18 shooters entered across 4 categories. But everyone knew the real event was the long-range precision competition. Wolf versus Hawkeye, champion versus challenger, pride versus skill. The range was packed with spectators. Soldiers who weren't competing, support staff, even Captain Pierce and Master Sergeant Brennan were watching from the observation tower. The energy was electric. Long-range precision consisted of 3 stages. Known distance targets from 600 to 1,000 meters. Unknown distance targets from 800 to 1,200 meters. And stress shoot with awkward positions, time limits, and psychological pressure. Wolf shot first in stage 1. He was good, very good. His fundamentals were solid, his breathing controlled. He'd stripped away the arrogance and found the skill underneath. 9 hits out of 10 targets. The only miss was a difficult 950-meter shot in a slight crosswind. The shot was technically sound. The conditions just happened to shift at the wrong moment. These things happen. Score 90 out of 100 possible points. The crowd applauded. It was a strong performance. Better than Wolf had shot in months. Then Kira stepped to the line. She took her time, calculated each shot, adjusted for conditions, moved with the methodical precision that defined everything she did. Each trigger press was a conversation between physics and will. 600 meters, hit, 700, hit, 800, hit, 900, hit, 950. The shot Wolf had missed. Slight crosswind, temperature gradient, humidity variation. Kira calculated, adjusted, fired, hit. 1,000 meters. Final target of stage 1. Maximum distance. Minimal margin for error. Hit. 10 hits out of 10 targets. Score 100 out of 100 possible points. The crowd erupted. People were shaking their heads in disbelief. Wolf stood watching, and his expression wasn't anger. It was recognition. This was what excellence looked like. This was the standard. Stage 2 was unknown distance. Shooters had to estimate range without laser rangefinders. This favored experience and intuition over pure technical skill. Wolf went first again. He'd spent years developing his range estimation abilities. Could usually get within 50 meters of actual distance just by reading environmental clues. But estimating and knowing were different things. He made calls that were close but not perfect. His shots reflected those small errors. 8 hits out of 10 targets. Score 80 out of 100. Total after 2 stages, 170. Kira approached stage 2 differently. She didn't just estimate, she calculated. Read the terrain, noted vegetation types that indicated elevation changes, observed how sound carried across distance, used every environmental clue to build mathematical models in her head. 800 meters, estimated at 795. Hit, 900, estimated at 910. Hit, 1,000. Estimated at 990. Hit, 10 targets, 10 calculations, 10 hits. Score 100 out of 100. Total after 2 stages, 200. Wolf had shot well, better than he'd shot in a year. But Kira was operating at a different level entirely. Perfect scores in both stages, not a single miss, not even a close call. Stage 3 was the stress shoot. 5 targets at varying distances from 700 to 1,100 meters. But shooters had to engage from awkward positions. Kneeling, sitting, standing unsupported, prone with time limits. And one shooter's choice position. This was Wolf's best category. He excelled at adaptability, at shooting from unconventional positions where others struggled. Kneeling shot at 700 meters and hit. Sitting shot at 800 hit. Prone with 30-second time limit at 900 hit. Shooter's choice at 1,000. He selected a modified kneeling position with elbow support. Hit. Final shot. Standing unsupported at 950 meters. The hardest shot in the entire competition. Human body sway, no artificial stabilization. Just muscle control and willpower. Wolf took his time, controlled his breathing, fought against his body's natural tremor. The shot broke clean. Miss, 10 centimeters right, close but not close enough. 4 hits out of 5. Score 80 out of 100. Total score for Garrett Wolf, 250 out of 300 possible points. It was the highest score anyone had achieved in 2 years of company competitions. A performance he should be proud of. The crowd applauded, soldiers congratulated him. He'd proven himself against difficult conditions and demanding standards. But Kira Dalton still had to shoot. She approached stage 3 with the same calm she brought to everything. This wasn't about competition. This was about demonstrating what perfect fundamentals looked like, what mastery of the craft meant. Kneeling at 700 meters hit, sitting at 800 hit, prone with time limit at 900 hit, with 5 seconds to spare. Shooter's choice at 1,000, she selected a modified prone position using her backpack as a rest. Stable, controlled, hit, which left only the standing unsupported shot. The one everyone missed, 950 meters with no support, no rest, no artificial stabilization. Kira stood at the line, rifle shouldered, body perfectly aligned, breathing controlled to the point where she barely seemed to breathe at all. The crowd fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. She looked impossibly steady, like a statue carved from stone. Her heart rate had dropped to 42 beats per minute. Her body had become a stable platform for the shot. The seconds stretched out. 10, 20, 30. Then she fired. 950 meters away, the steel target rang with a clear, unmistakable ping. Hit. 5 targets. 5 hits. Score 100 out of 100. Total score for Kira Dalton, 300 out of 300 possible points. Perfect score. Something that had never been achieved in Cypress Ridge competition history. Something most people thought was impossible. 30 shots across 3 stages. 30 hits. Not a single miss. Not one shot outside the 10 ring. The crowd exploded. Soldiers cheered, shouted, celebrated. Even those who'd bet against her seemed excited to witness something historic. But Garrett Wolfe stood frozen, staring at the target, his face cycling through emotions. Disbelief, then acceptance, then something that might have been relief. He'd lost. Comprehensively. Publicly. Undeniably. She hadn't just beaten him, she'd shown him what the top of the mountain looked like. And instead of humiliation, he felt liberated. Because now he knew, now he understood, and he could finally stop pretending. Master Sergeant Brennan approached the 2 shooters after the scores were announced. Hell of a competition. Both of you shot exceptionally well. Wolfe extended his hand to Kira. You're better than I am. Better than I'll probably ever be. And I'm sorry for every disrespectful thing I've said since you arrived. Kira shook his hand. You shot well today, Specialist Wolfe. Better than you've shot in years, I'd bet. That's what happens when you stop worrying about being better than everyone else and focus on being better than yesterday. My father used to say something similar. Or at least that's what Master Sergeant Brennan tells me. Smart man, your father. Yeah, I wish I'd listened to the lesson sooner. Wolfe hesitated. Would you teach me, really teach me, not the advanced stuff, the fundamentals, the building blocks, everything I thought I knew but clearly don't? On one condition. Name it. You stop competing with me. You compete with yourself. Every day, try to be better than you were yesterday. That's the only competition that matters. Wolfe felt something in his chest crack open. Relief, gratitude, hope. I can do that. And over the next 3 weeks, something remarkable happened at Cypress Ridge. Garrett Wolfe became Kira's first genuine student. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. Every morning at 0500, they met at the range. She broke down her technique in ways that made sense, explained the physics, the mathematics, the mental discipline required for extreme precision. And Wolfe learned, really learned, not just the mechanics of shooting, but the philosophy behind it. The understanding that precision was a craft demanding respect, that arrogance was the enemy of improvement, that true skill came from humility and constant refinement. Within 2 weeks, he was hitting targets he'd previously thought impossible. His fundamentals had improved dramatically, but more importantly, his attitude had changed. He thanked people, offered help without being asked, treated everyone with respect, regardless of rank or capability. He was becoming the man his father had wanted him to be. Other soldiers noticed the transformation. They approached Kira asking for guidance. She started informal classes on advanced marksmanship, open to anyone willing to learn. The woman who'd wanted to hide became a teacher. The legend who'd wanted to fade became a mentor. And in teaching others, Kira found something she'd lost. Purpose without the weight of life or death stakes. She still carried ghosts, still remembered the 6 teammates who'd died, still woke up sometimes calculating shots she'd missed years ago. But now instead of running from what she accepted of it. She was Hawkeye. A predator, yes, but also a protector. Someone who could pass on skills that might save lives someday. One evening, Master Sergeant Brennan found her sitting alone on the observation deck watching the sunset paint the Louisiana sky in shades of orange and purple. He settled into the chair beside her without asking permission. "Mind some company, specialist?" "Not at all, Master Sergeant." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Brennan spoke. "You've made quite an impact in 2 months. Wolf's like a different person. Half the company has improved their marksmanship scores. Even the old-timers are asking you questions." "Just passing on what I was taught." "It's more than that. You're giving people something to aspire to. Showing them what's possible when you commit fully to mastery of a craft. That's rare." Kira was quiet for a moment. "My team leader's last words to me were, 'Make sure this meant something.' I've been trying to figure out how to do that for 6 months. Teaching feels like it might be the answer." "I think you're right." Brennan paused. "Command came to me again. They want you back. Said they've identified the officer who compromised your mission. He's running an off-books operation, and they need someone with your skill set to—" "No." "You didn't let me finish." "I don't need to. The answer is no. I'm not going back to that life." "They said they could offer closure, justice for your team." Kira turned to look at him directly. "Master Sergeant, my team doesn't need revenge. They needed to live. They didn't get that. But I did. And the way I honor them isn't by killing more people. It's by teaching others to survive. By making sure the next generation comes home to their families." Brennan smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Your team would be proud of you." "I hope so." As if on cue, Kira's phone rang. Classified number displayed on the screen. She looked at it for a long moment, then answered on speaker so Brennan could hear. "This is Specialist Dalton." Agent Williams' voice came through the line. "Dalton, we have confirmed the officer who sold out your team. He's moving operations in 48 hours. This is your last chance to get justice. After that, the trail goes cold." Long pause. Kira looked out at the base where her students were practicing, where Garrett was probably cleaning his rifle, where Natalie was learning fundamentals that might save her life someday. "Agent Williams, my team deserved to live. They didn't get that chance. But I did, and the way I honor their memory isn't by adding more bodies to the count. It's by teaching others to survive, by making sure someone else's team comes home intact." "So that's a no." "That's a no. Hawkeye is retired, but Specialist Kira Dalton, she's exactly where she belongs and where she's needed." "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Don't call again." She hung up, set the phone down, looked at Brennan. "That must have been hard," he said quietly. "It was. Part of me wants revenge, wants to hunt down everyone responsible and make them pay. But that path just leads to more death, more ghosts, and I have enough of those already. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice." "So do I, Master Sergeant. So do I." 3 months later, Kira stood in front of 15 soldiers during an early morning training session. The sun was just starting to paint the Louisiana sky with color. The air was cool as Louisiana ever got. Perfect conditions for precision shooting. Garrett Wolf stood beside her, co-instructing, demonstrating techniques she'd taught him. He'd become good, really good. Not at her level, but better than he'd been, better than he'd ever been, and more importantly, he'd become humble, respectful, the kind of soldier his father would have been proud of. Natalie Sterling was in the front row, notebook in hand, taking careful notes. She'd transferred from communications to marksmanship training. Said she wanted to learn from the best. Was considering making shooting her specialty. Other faces filled out the class, young soldiers, old soldiers, people who'd been skeptical at first but had learned to respect the quiet woman with the predator's call sign. "All right, everyone," Kira called out. "Today, we're covering wind reading at extreme distances. This is where most shooters fail. They rely too much on equipment, and not enough on observation. Technology assists, but understanding survives. Who can tell me the three primary environmental factors that affect bullet trajectory at ranges beyond 1,000 meters? Hands went up. She called on a private in the back row, listened to his answer, corrected gently where he was wrong, reinforced what he'd gotten right. This was teaching. This was legacy. This was how she honored the dead. The session went for 2 hours. By the end, every soldier had fired at least 20 rounds at distances ranging from 800 to 1,500 meters. Scores had improved across the board. More importantly, understanding had deepened. They weren't just pulling triggers, they were becoming craftsmen. As the class dispersed, one young soldier approached Kira hesitantly. "Specialist Dalton, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What's the secret to being a great shooter? Is it natural talent, special equipment? What makes someone like you?" Kira thought about the question carefully. "Then there's no secret, just 10,000 hours of practice, humility to learn from everyone, and understanding that the best shot isn't the one that proves you're skilled, it's the one that brings everyone home." She paused. "The rifles, the scopes, the fancy gear, they're tools, useful tools, but they're not what makes you great. What makes you great is commitment to the craft, respect for the fundamentals, and understanding that every skill you develop might save a life someday. Yours, or someone you care about." Garrett added, "And having a teacher who doesn't give up on you, even when you're being an arrogant ass who doesn't deserve her patience." The young soldier laughed. "Thank you both." As he walked away, Master Sergeant Brennan approached. He was in civilian clothes now, officially retired as of last week. But he still came to the base, still watched the training, still provided guidance when asked. "Hell of a class specialist, you've got a gift for teaching. Learn from the best Master Sergeant, from my instructor, from you, from everyone who's ever taken the time to pass on knowledge. Your students are lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have them. They give me purpose, direction, something worth waking up for beyond just survival." Brennan smiled, then pulled something from his pocket, a small wooden box. "I wanted to give you something. Been carrying it around for a week trying to find the right moment." He opened the box. Inside was a military shooting badge. The design was old, worn, from a different era. This was Thomas Wolfe's Expert Marksman badge from 1988. I've kept it for 37 years. Couldn't give it to Garrett because I was afraid he'd see it as pressure. Expectation. Another thing to live up to rather than honor. Brennan held out the box. "But I think you'd understand what it means. And I think Thomas would want you to have it." Kira looked at the badge, at the history it represented, the legacy. "Master Sergeant, I can't accept this. It belongs in your family. You are family specialist. Everyone who commits to the craft, everyone who teaches the next generation, everyone who understands that skills aren't for showing off. They're for bringing people home. That's family." Kira took the box carefully, reverently. "Thank you, I'll honor this." "I know you will. That's why I'm giving it to you." As Brennan walked away, Kira stood holding the small wooden box. Inside it was more than a badge. It was a promise, a connection, a reminder that legacy wasn't about being remembered. It was about teaching others so your knowledge lived on. She thought about the 6 teammates she'd lost: Rodriguez, Stevens, Garcia, Palmer, Kowalski, Williams. They died because someone had failed them, because intelligence was compromised, because the system broke down. She couldn't bring them back, couldn't change what happened, but she could make sure their sacrifice meant something. By teaching others, by passing on skills, by making sure the next generation had every tool possible to survive and return home. That evening, Kira wrote 6 letters, one to each of her fallen teammates' families. She'd been avoiding it for months, didn't know what to say, how to explain that she'd lived while their loved ones died. But now she had something to offer. Not explanation, not justification, just truth. "Your son, brother, husband was the finest operator I ever worked with. His death was not in vain. I'm teaching others the skills he taught me. I'm making sure his knowledge survives. I'm doing everything I can to make sure someone else's family doesn't get the visit you got. That's how I honor his memory. That's how I make his sacrifice mean something." She sealed the letters, addressed them carefully. Tomorrow she'd mail them. And maybe finally she could start forgiving herself for surviving. 6 months after arriving at Cypress Ridge, Specialist Kira Hawkeye Dalton sat on her bunk cleaning her rifle. The same ritual she'd performed 10,000 times. But tonight it felt different. Lighter somehow. Natalie was in the next bunk reading a manual on advanced ballistics. Garrett was outside running late PT, pushing himself harder than the requirements demanded. Master Sergeant Brennan was probably at home with his grandchildren, finally able to enjoy retirement without the weight of broken promises. Her phone buzzed. A text message from Captain Pierce. Specialist Dalton Command is asking again about operational assignment. I told them you're more valuable here than anywhere else. They agreed to stop asking. You're officially permanent party at Cypress Ridge. Congratulations. Kira smiled. Permanent party. Not running anymore. Not hiding. Just serving in a different way. Teaching instead of killing. Building instead of destroying. Creating legacy instead of adding to body counts. She thought about the title of her story. They'd mocked her call sign, dismissed her because she was small, female, quiet, said she didn't belong, that she'd wash out, that she was just another tech-dependent kid with fancy gear. But Hawkeye never needed their approval. She only needed the math, the physics, the cold certainty that some hunters didn't need open ground to kill. Some hunters thrived in the shadows. And the best hunters, they taught others to hunt, passed on knowledge, made sure the next generation survived. She finished cleaning her rifle, set it carefully in its case. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, new opportunities to pass on what she'd learned. The ghosts were still there. Rodriguez, Stevens, Garcia, Palmer, Kowalski, Williams. They always would be. But now when she saw their faces, she didn't just see death. She saw legacy, knowledge she could pass on, skills that could save lives, purpose that honored their sacrifice. Kira Dalton closed her eyes and for the first time in 6 months, felt something like peace. Not happiness, not forgetting, just acceptance. She'd come to Cypress Ridge running from what she was. Took her months to realize she wasn't running from being a weapon. She was running from being alone. Now she wasn't alone. She had students, purpose, a mission that didn't end with body counts. And somewhere in the Louisiana night, 6 good men were watching. Maybe finally she was doing something that would make them proud.